Hey guys, it's Todd with Commercial Tracks, and today I want to talk to you briefly about how I got my first song placement with the Production Music Library. Whenever I talk to people about what I do, that I'm involved in writing music for Production Music Libraries, inevitably the question always comes up, well, how did you get involved in that? And so today I want to share with you briefly how I got involved, talk a little bit about music supervisors, a little bit about the software that I used when I got started, a little bit about the connections that were so helpful in me getting involved in this, in hopes that this will be something that's helpful to you, not so much a step-by-step of what you need to do, but just a little bit more transparent. This is what happened to me, this was my experience, and hopefully you'll walk away with some information that'll help you as you get started on your journey writing music for Production Music Libraries. Alright, so number one, the first thing that I would tell you is I got involved in writing for Production Music Libraries. It was through a connection, right? So networking, connecting with people that are in the industry, that's always an important and a valuable thing to do. And so what happened with me is I had a small project studio. I had moved back to my hometown in Florida from Nashville. I'd been up in Nashville for a few years. I moved back and was able to open up with a friend a small production studio. But at any rate, someone came through the studio that was trying to check out the studio to see if it might be useful for him for work that he might have to do, and he was actually a person that was involved in Production Music Libraries. And so after meeting with him, we just kind of clicked and hit it off, and so he'd asked the question, hey, had you ever considered writing music for a Production Music Library? To be quite honest with you, I didn't even really know what that was. I knew that there were ways of making a living and earning money through production music, or through music production for commercial, TV, film, that type of thing, but I had no idea how to get involved in that type of work. And so he asked the question, and so yeah, wow, I was definitely interested in that type of a situation. And so what happened was he basically connected me with the music supervisor that was over the library that he was writing for. That was my inroad into that particular industry. It was no guarantee that I would get any placements, but this was how I made the connection to a legit music library that was actually paying composers to compose music for the library. Anything that got accepted or approved, they basically paid a fee for that production music that you created. So connections is a big part of what happened in my situation. The next thing that I would tell you that's very important, and I cited this in a video that I put together about how to submit for Production Music Libraries, is that you still got to do your research. When I made the connection, or when I was able to connect with the music supervisor for the library that I first placed with, the music supervisor actually, they submitted, or they made available to all of the composers, potential composers, a list of songs that were acceptable arrangements for the genres that they were looking for music for. And actually my first songs that were placed were actually in an urban R&B genre, where the library was looking for that type of music. These were just instrumental productions that fit into particular genres, and I had to do the research of going through, listening to those examples, finding other examples that were like them. I can remember, even going through, and if there was an artist that they cited, I would find similar artists and just kind of create my own playlist and just kind of listen through and get into that vibe. It was actually a great thing that they said, hey, here are 10 songs that are like the style of music that we're looking for. And so it really cut down on my research. All right, so thirdly, I mentioned a moment ago about the music supervisor. What happened was, basically, I only had hardware instruments. So my keyboard was basically a hardware keyboard. I didn't have any software instruments. Software instruments were just coming on the scene. So I was working in a DAW. I think I was working with Pro Tools at the time, but Pro Tools had a couple of instruments, but I wasn't necessarily using those instruments to compose my music. My Pro Tools system was connected to outboard gear, and the outboard gear was what I was using to actually source the sounds. And so the music supervisor recognized from listening to the first couple of tracks that I turned in, he says, well, first of all, you're going to have to get some software sense, because the way that the industry was going at the time, and it's the way that the industry still is today, in order for you to write for those libraries, you need software instruments. The sound quality is such that it sounds as good as if you had live instruments on the track. My first investment in software synthesizer, I didn't break the bank. The only thing I could afford at the time was a program called Sample Tank. And I purchased Sample Tank, I don't know, 2.5 or 2.0, something like that. It was just a broad mix of things, right? Pianos, strings, guitars, just the basic nuts and bolts, but they were software-based instruments. And man, this thing, it paid for itself over and over and over and over again. The next thing that I would bring to your attention was you got to be willing to put yourself out there. I must have wrote about 8 or 10 songs that were rejected. They did not take them. They didn't want them. It took me a while to begin to understand this process. So I wrote some stuff and I submitted some stuff that straight up got rejected. It took a little while for me to actually begin to hear and understand what a music library was looking for. I'll tell you, the one thing that I think that was the most valuable to me was to recognize that it wasn't about how well I could arrange or compose a piece of music. It was about writing music that was going to be good enough to catch the listener's attention, but not so much that it got in the way of the voiceovers or the other products. There's voiceover, there's product, there's video, there's other things that are happening other than just your music. This is what got me to the place to where I finally got a placement. And actually it was 2 placements at one time. I never will forget, getting the email, opening up the email, and noticing that 2 of the submissions that I made were approved. And this was some urban R&B music that I'd actually written for the library. I banged out 2 pieces of music that I probably did in an afternoon. Maybe I did 6 or 7 hours to write both those pieces of music, get them arranged, get them mixed, get them mastered, and submit it to the library. And they purchased them, and at the time they were paying like $500 a track. So those 2 tracks earned me $1,000, and I worked for like 6 hours. I'm like, I can do this all the time, right? And so, that was how I placed my first couple of tracks, right? But I had to be willing to put myself out there. I had to be willing to listen to the critiques. I had to establish those connections and make good on those connections, right? If I'd never placed the call or followed up with the guy who came into my studio, then I would have never had the opportunity to connect to the music supervisor and ultimately submit material for the library to see if I can get a placement, right? I know one of the things that you're going to, mention is that, hey, it's a very saturated market these days. Well, saturated doesn't mean that you can't write or that you can't produce or that you can't get placements. It just means it's saturated. If a market is saturated, it means it was a good idea. You can look at it from the standpoint that there's so much out there that there's no way anybody's going to buy my music or purchase my music or use my music for a production. Or you can look at it like, hey, it's saturated because it's something that people use. It's something that's valuable. It's something that a lot of people realize it has value. It has importance. And so trust me, there's a lot of content out there, and more places are looking for content every day. Channels are popping up all the time. My encouragement to you is don't shy away from it because it's seemingly oversaturated. I could have argued the same thing back when I started 18 years ago. I'm still writing music for libraries, and I'll get placements with major brands, and it still blows my mind. And so, again, it's just something you got to put yourself out there, and you got to be willing to do that if you want to get placements. So again, this video was intended to just kind of share a little bit more transparently my experience with placing my first couple of songs with a music library. And so I hope that this has been a help to you. If it has, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.